If someone gave me the opportunity to design my own retro gaming rig, something that I got to pick every aspect of, this, my friends, would be it. Stay tuned. Where was this when I was a kid? This week's sponsor is me. If you'd like to support this channel, the best way is to pick up a t-shirt at cybercputech.com. All my t-shirts are extremely high quality and durable. These are the same shirts I wear in videos. So if you like the shirt I'm wearing, then head over to cybercputech.com and pick yourself up one today. I've been playing around with retro gaming consoles for quite some time. And one of the things about retro gaming consoles is it always seems like you have just as much as you need, but not really the things that you want. And in some cases, you don't even have the stuff that you need. Like for instance, this right here is the Nespi Case by RetroFlag, and it's a great little Game Boy simulator. Unfortunately, it's based on the Raspberry Pi Zero, and as you know, that isn't the best system for playing retro games on. In reality, it's really nice to use a Raspberry Pi 4, although you're limited on what kind of devices you can get to put a Raspberry Pi 4 into. RetroFlag actually came to the rescue a while back with their Nespi Case 4, and it's actually a really nice little case. I did a video on this one a while back, and I'll go ahead and tag it here if you'd like to check it out. The downside to this one though is it's not mobile. It'd be really nice if you could take both of these cases and put them into one case. And you know, in RetroFlag's defense, they actually did just recently come out with a new revision to this one here that uses the CM4, and that's one I'd really like to check out. However, this is still missing a lot of things that I'd like to have in a retro gaming console. Yes, it's nice that it looks like the Game Boy. However, today we're going to be looking at the Piboy DMG. This is a console made by Experimental Pi, and it comes with pretty much everything you would want in a retro gaming console. This one not only has the look of the original Game Boy, but you have 6 buttons, you also have your start and select and your D-pad, and you even have a joystick control as well as your 2 rear buttons in the back. This thing here, I have to say, has everything that I would ever want in a retro gaming console, and it's mobile. It even comes with a battery in the back. Now, let's go over some of the specs of this thing real quick so you can kind of see what you're getting yourself into. So this device comes, first off, with a 4,500 milliamp hour battery built into the back of it right here. You can replace this battery if you want, but it's one that you're gonna have to order straight from Experimental Pi if you wanna have a spare one left over. Also, this comes with a 3.5-inch IPS display that supports 640 by 480 resolutions, and on a screen this small, that should be plenty of resolution for old retro games. This thing also has a built-in volume control as well as an earphone jack on the bottom. Yeah, because some devices still come with earphone jacks, believe it or not. This thing also has an amplified speaker built into it, so you don't necessarily need an earphone jack. And you can also adjust the brightness on the display. This also has a micro USB charging port on it, so you can charge the built-in 4,500 milliamp hour battery. Now, this thing supports a Raspberry Pi Zero, a Raspberry Pi 3, or a Raspberry Pi 4. Now, the problem is I don't know why you would use anything but a Raspberry Pi 4 in this thing. The fact that it supports it, I wouldn't use it with anything else, because the Raspberry Pi 4 is the reason why you would want to use a case like this in the first place. Now, you can also get an optional HDMI out for this one as well, so you can connect this to an external device. And the fact that you'll have access to all your USB ports after you're done means that you can also use regular retro controllers as well as a big screen TV, which I've tried out before and it works really well. This thing also has a built-in fan because we all know that the Raspberry Pi 4 likes to get a little warm. Now, before you ask, this also is a lot more expensive than the Nespi case, and for good reason. It comes with a lot of really good features. These things go for about 130 bucks. If you want the HDMI adapter to plug it into another device, then you're looking at about 140, because it's about 10 bucks for the HDMI adapter. Now, let's tear this box open and I'll show you what all it comes with. The box that this thing comes in is actually a really nice box, and it's packed really well. Let me pull it open here and you can see what I'm talking about. When I ordered this thing, the ordering process is similar to buying something from Etsy. I had to pre-order it, and when I got it, you know, it kind of had the feeling of ordering something from maybe somebody that's doing stuff in their garage. I mean, I'm sure that's probably not the way that they assemble these things, but it kind of had a really low-tech ordering process. But when I got it and I saw the packaging itself, it's actually pretty high-tech. This company right here did a really good job of putting this thing into a really good package. Now, normally, the Piboy itself is going to be in this first pocket right here, and it's nicely covered in bubble wrap. And then over on the other side, you have all the accessories that come with this thing. Let's go through them real quick. So first and foremost, it comes with a quick start guide, which if you're into reading quick start guides, it's pretty much a quick start guide. I don't know why you would read it. I haven't read it. But if you go through, you've got a nice little carrying case for the device itself, which is really nice. It's actually a really nice carrying case. Also, it comes with a micro USB cord and a charger that supports running the Raspberry Pi 4. Remember, the Raspberry Pi 4 requires a little bit more power than the older Raspberry Pis, so you want to make sure to use a power adapter that's compatible with the Raspberry Pi 4 itself. It also comes with a nice little bag here with just about every accessory that you're going to need in order to put this thing together. It comes with the actual plates themselves that you're going to need in order to put in either the Raspberry Pi 3 or the Raspberry Pi 4. And for some reason, mine came with 2 sets of each plate, and I'm not sure why. It also comes with an extra set of rear buttons, so if you want to change the rear buttons in the back of the case, you can, and we're actually going to do that. It also comes with all the screws that you're going to need in order to put it together. And in my case, mine came with the HDMI adapter. Now, if you order one without the HDMI adapter, it's unfortunately not going to come with this. But for an extra 10 bucks, I highly recommend getting this adapter because it gives you a lot of other uses that you can use this console for. And then other than that, what we have to do now is actually tear this thing apart and put it all together and see how it runs. What do you say? Let's do it. Now, you're actually not going to need any tools to put this thing together because like every other Raspberry Pi device on the market, it comes with its own screwdriver. And you know, as I've said in other videos, do people who build Raspberry Pis not have their own tools? Because I have about 1 million of these screwdrivers because they come with every single device that you buy. It's really bizarre, but you got your own screwdriver, so if you need it, there you go. But you are going to need a Raspberry Pi 4, or if you want to, you can use a Raspberry Pi 0 or 3, but I still don't know why you would want to. Definitely use a Raspberry Pi 4. You won't regret it. And you're also going to need an SD card. I have this SD card preloaded with the Experimental Pi image off their website, and I'll go ahead and leave a link to that in the description below. It's kind of an outdated image, but it's configured to use everything that this case already has to it. Now, they also have instructions on how to build your own image. So if you want to use a more current image, then you can definitely make your own, but you're going to have to follow the instructions on their website to do so. So now to put this thing together, I'm going to go ahead and use the bag that it comes with to make sure I don't scratch this awesome IPS display. But while we're talking about that, this also has a glass cover on it, not like the GPi case that has the plexiglass cover on it. So it is kind of nice to have a cover that we don't have to worry about scratching. So once we flip it over, first thing I'm going to do is pull the battery out. Now this thing originally ships with the battery unplugged, so you're not going to have to worry about unplugging the battery because it should already be unplugged for you. But once we set it out of the way, we got to go ahead and remove the screws from the back right here, and we can tear into this thing. So if you're doing this, I would probably recommend using a better screwdriver because while it's nice to have a free screwdriver, this is a garbage screwdriver, just saying. So now that I got this apart, we can pull the top off and make sure to lose all the screws as they fall out of the case. That's always nice. I'm gonna go get a better screwdriver. I'll be right back. If you guys don't already have an iFixit kit, I would definitely get one. I'll go ahead and tag the video right here where I went over this kit, but you know, it's the best money you can spend if you do stuff like this a lot. So let's get to it. All right, that's much better. So the first thing that we're going to want to do when we tear into this thing is we want to pull this top hat off. This hat right here is the hat that we actually use to connect to the GPIO ports on the Raspberry Pi itself. That's how it gets its video and how the controls function and things of that nature. So to pull it off, you have 4 screws. You have one here, 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 and here. And you might also want to unplug this plug right here just to make it a little bit easier so you can actually separate this hat completely from the unit. You also want to make sure not to lose this little power switch right here. It's really easy to fall off. And then you have another blank that goes right here, and this is the blank for your HDMI port. And if you're going to be using an HDMI port adapter, you're definitely going to want to pull that one out too. So first thing we're going to do is go ahead and unscrew these 4 screws right here. And then from here, we want to make sure to unplug this little plug right here. This is the plug that actually connects to the display itself. And you should just be able to put a fingernail underneath it and just pop it up. It pops up really easy, and then just move it out of the way. And then we can pull the hat out of the way just like that. Set it aside. And now the next part is we have to actually connect the Raspberry Pi 4 into the case. And to do that, we need to pick the adapter that we need to use with the Raspberry Pi 4. So take the 2 adapters it comes with and just match them up to make sure that you find the one that fits the Raspberry Pi 4. And then at this point, it's also a good idea to hook up your HDMI adapter, because your HDMI adapter is going to have to go in with the Raspberry Pi. And then to plug this in, you just plug this right into your first HDMI port, the one that's right next to your audio cable right there. And it fits in just like that. So at this point, we can go ahead and lower the Raspberry Pi 4 into position. And when we lower it in, as you can see on the DMG case itself, it's got these little pegs that kind of stick up from the plastic, and it lowers right down and fits perfectly right into these holes in the Raspberry Pi. Okay, so to put the Raspberry Pi 4 in, it's kind of a balancing act. First thing you're going to want to do is plug in your SD card adapter. If it's already situated like mine is here, you just move it like this and you plug it into the bottom of the Raspberry Pi, just like so, just like as if you were to plug in a regular SD card. And then you lower this down into the case, just like that. And make sure you also use your little adapters here, or your little plastic grommets that go over the different ports that come out the side. And then once you get this in place, you want to use just a little bit of force to push it down onto the pegs to make sure that it holds in place. And you should hear a little bit of a snap possibly. Okay, so now one more thing that we need to do to get the Raspberry Pi completely installed is you're going to want to take the screws that came with your HDMI adapter and make sure to screw those down to secure the HDMI adapter in place. Now you want to make sure when you're screwing screws down on this thing, you're really careful. They don't need to be super tight. They just need to be snug. You definitely don't want to strip these screws. So once those screws are down, the Raspberry Pi should be completely installed. Now we have to install the top hat that comes with the cooling fan on it. And to do that, all you have to do is line up this connector with the GPIO pins that are on the Raspberry Pi itself. So we're going to go ahead and lower this down into place. Make sure that everything's lined up. And then just give it a little bit of pressure to push it down onto the pins. And then once the hat seats onto these little standoffs in the plastic right here, then you should be good to go. And then we should be able to take our 4 screws that we took off before and screw them down to hold the hat in place. All right, so now that we have the hat screwed in place, we want to hook up the IPS panel and the power that goes to this top hat as well. So to do that, we're just going to go ahead and plug this plug in right here. And this should hook up our power to the hat. And then there's a little notch cut out in the hat right here where you can put this wire in so it doesn't get in the way of anything. And then we want to hook up our IPS connector just like this. And you want to be real delicate with this. This IPS connector is really, really small and it could get damaged. And then the last thing that we need to do is hook up this ribbon cable right here. This ribbon cable connects the data from the Pi hat itself to the motherboard. So to do that, we want to take this little bar right here and make sure to pull this little connector up. And then once we get it pulled up, we want to get this one in place. And it might be a good idea to use a pair of tweezers to get this in place, because it actually is a very tight fitting little ribbon cable here. Okay, once you get it in, it should slide right into that plug. Okay, see as it slid in right there? And then once you push this little lock down, you should be able to see just a little sliver of the blue right there. And then that should be good. All right, so now that we got this together, the last step is I want to go ahead and change the buttons on the back of the case itself so we have the more raised up red buttons in the back. And to do that, we're going to go ahead and switch this here so we have the back of the case. And we want to remove these screws right here on the side. It looks like one of these screws came stripped out, didn't it? So I'm going to get that screw removed and I'll be right back. All right, I got that screw out. And you know, if you ever find a stripped screw in any device, don't use it. Just get rid of it. Don't use it again. You don't ever want to screw a stripped screw back into a device again because you might have to take it out someday. So once you get that out, what we got to do now is we have to just pull these buttons out and set them aside and then take our new ones and put them in place of where the old ones were. Just like that. And then once they're in place, we're going to go ahead and screw it back down. And luckily, this case comes with a lot of extra screws. So that one strip screw that I had before, I had another one that I could replace it with. But once these are in place, now we have kind of some buttons that raise up a little bit more. So before we put the back case on, we can't forget to put our power button on because how else are we going to turn the thing on when we're done? So to put this on, you just line it up with the little power switch right here. All this is a little extension for the power switch. And to put it in place, it just slips right in place, just like that. And then you want to make sure to just balance it in place while you put the back on. And then when you're putting the back on, you want to make sure that the faceplate for the Raspberry Pi itself, as well as the power button, as well as the HDMI adapter, all line up the way they're supposed to. And now that it's seated in place, we can go ahead and attach our screws again, and we'll do that real quick here. All right, now that we have all our screws in place, the last step is to connect the battery, and we should be ready to go. Now to connect this battery, you should just plug it in. You can only plug it in one way. Go ahead and plug it into the plug on the bottom of the case, just like this. Line the plug up and then plug it into place. It is a little bit difficult to get to, but luckily you don't have to take this thing out. And then once it's in place, you should be able just to stick the battery right into this rear compartment. Now it's a pretty tight fit, but there's plenty of room for the battery in there. So now that we have the battery in it, now the next step is to actually put the SD card in it. And just for reference, you want to put it in with the contacts facing the keypad in the front of the computer. So we're going to push it in just like that. And now that it's in, we can go ahead and hit the power button and fire this thing up. And if we didn't break anything, it should come on. And there we go. And that's all it takes to get yourself a pretty nice little retro gaming console. Now, I did have some issues during assembly, and there's some stuff that I definitely want to go over. For one, the screws in this thing are really cheap. They're really easy to strip, so just be really cautious. This is actually the second screw I stripped, and you know, throw them out when you're done because the kit comes with a lot of extra screws, and it's probably because they know that they're cheap. The other issue I ran into is the buttons that I switched over, the red buttons in the back right here. These buttons right here have this little X shape right in the middle of them. And when I assembled this the first time, the right button was completely stuck pushed. And I actually had to take a file and file down that little X shape right there in order to give it enough room to be able to push the button. And you know, to be honest with you, this is a DIY kit, and it's always meant to be a DIY kit. If you have issues putting stuff together, then you might want to just buy the complete kit from them. They do sell this as a complete kit, and it is available where you don't have to do any work at all, but what fun is there in that? It's fun being able to put this kind of stuff together yourself. The other issue that I had with this thing is that there really isn't any room on the device to be able to put a heatsink on the processor on the Raspberry Pi 4. And you know, with the fan in here, it definitely keeps it cool enough to where you can play games. I actually have a temperature monitor on it right now, and it's sitting at about 48 Celsius right now. So it definitely keeps it at a nice temperature. And all I did is put a little Raspberry Pi copper shim on there, and I'll go ahead and put a picture right here so you can see what I'm talking about. I was able to fit a heatsink on the memory module, and that might help a little bit, but it would be nice to have a little bit of room in there to be able to put a heatsink on the CPU, because we might actually be able to get some overclocks off of this thing. Without a heatsink on it, I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'll definitely give it a shot and see what happens. So now, let's go ahead and see how this thing plays games. So we can't test out a Game Boy without testing out Tetris. So it actually plays really well, and you know, Tetris probably isn't the best game to see how well this thing performs, because if you want to play Tetris, you could easily do that on a Raspberry Pi Zero. If you want to do something on a Pi 4, you definitely want to try out some higher end games. Let's give those a shot now. Let's try Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 and see how that works. So this is definitely a game that you wouldn't be able to play on a Raspberry Pi Zero for sure. And it actually plays pretty good. But it'd be nicer if I had a bigger screen. But you know, what do you want for something you can carry around in your hand, right? So this thing definitely plays all the games that you're going to want to throw at it. At least all the games that you can run on RetroPie on a Raspberry Pi 4. And if the little screen isn't enough for you, then you can definitely plug into the HDMI port and use the USB ports in the back so you can actually connect a regular joystick to it. That's probably what I'm going to use instead of this one from now on my TV. But anyway, if this was helpful to you, then please like this video and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon so you can be notified of future videos. I post a new video every week. Oh, and hey, before you go, check out a couple of these videos. Have a great day. Oh, you know what? Can't forget this.